Where do reptilian and amphibian Pokemon fit on the Pokemon family tree? Well, this is the question that I'm looking to answer with this video. I'm combining these two groups together because amphibians probably aren't big enough for their own video. Because of this is probably one of the biggest groupings I've done, and it's the first one to feature starter Pokemon. In fact, it features 12 of them. Can you name all of the amphibious or reptilian starter Pokemon? If you haven't seen the last videos, I'd recommend checking them out. We last left off with Relicanth at the end of the fish Pokemon. I think that I can see a lot of similarities between Relicanth and the next Pokemon on the chart, Dragapult. Dragapult has a very similar aquatic body type, and I think that their head shapes are quite similar. I can imagine that the first Relicanths that came to land became Dragapults. However, the move might not have worked out for Dragapult, hence why it's a ghost type and has gone extinct similar to its real life counterpart, the Diplocalus. Instead, Relicanth has been able to survive, living on as a living fossil, hence why it's considered one of the oldest Pokemon in the world. Dragapult marks the first tetrapod animal in the Pokemon chart. Tetrapod is just the name for four-legged animals, and while Pokemon does have some four-legged animals that we've already seen, take Gliscor for example, these are actually based off non-tetrapod animals, Gliscor being a scorpion. Dragapult is also the first amphibian. Amphibians have a very slimy and moist skin that means that they always need to be near water. They also need water to give birth. Think of frog spawn in this example. Pokemon actually does a very good job in reflecting this. Pokemon in this group have abilities like water absorb, damp or dry skin to reflect this, and a lot of them are water type or ground type, reflecting the areas that these type of animals live in. Alongside Dragapult, we can divide amphibians into two groups, Anura and Uradella. Anura is the technical term for frogs and toads. While you might think that the best way to divide these Pokemon is into frog Pokemon and toad Pokemon, there's actually no biological difference between the two, it's purely aesthetic. We tend to call the smaller and more smooth Anura frogs, while the larger and wartier versions are called toads. By this definition, only Seismitoad and Venusaur are actually toads, meaning that Politoed would have to join Vespiquen and Beedrill in the group of Pokemon that are named after the wrong type of animal. As for the other frogs, we can start to see some variation between them. Greninja is based off a particular type of very pointy frog, hence why it's so angular. Toxicroak is obviously a poisonous dart frog, hence its poison type, while Bellibolt is based off a type of dwarf frog that has fake eyes, much like Bellibolt. The second grouping of amphibians are Uradella or Uradella. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. However, they're salamanders. We might think of salamanders as a specific type of animal, but it's actually an umbrella term. A lot of the salamander Pokemon are amalgams of different types of salamanders. Take Quagsire and Swampert. They have features of axolotls, mud puppies, and mud skippers, but aren't any one of them in particular. Licky is probably a lungless salamander, which has a projectile tongue, hence why it's themed around its tongue. Toxtricity and Salazzle are two that I'm a little doubtful of. They share some features of newts, but also are very lizard-like. Toxtricity I'm more confident on, as it looks very newt-like and is found in wetlands. However, Salazzle, despite its name, is found in very dry and arid areas, which could suggest it's a type of lizard. However, for now, I've included it as a salamander. From here, we move to amniotic life. Amniotic essentially means that this animal doesn't need water to give birth.
Put water in it. Have a baby on land in an egg. Water is in the egg. Baby in the egg, in the water, in the egg.
For lizards and later birds, this means having a hard egg, whereas for most mammals, this means live birth. Within amniotic life, we can divide it into two groups, sauropods and mammals. Hi, this is me from the future, and this is a slight mistake in the script. This is meant to be sauropsida, meaning lizard-faced, not sauropod. I'll talk about real sauropods later on in the video. For this video, we will only be going over sauropods, or reptiles. The terms sauropods and reptiles can be used interchangeably. However, we generally refer to reptiles as the sauropods that aren't birds. Sauropods themselves can be divided into two groups, Lepidosauria and Archelosauria. Within Lepidosauria, we have all of these snakes. These are mostly the Pokemon you would expect to be in this group, as well as the Dunsparce. The Dunsparce is based off a Japanese yokai of a very fat, venomous snake. As a result, I've included it in here and put it with the other venomous snakes like Arbok, the Cobra, and Seviper, the Viper. Sandaconda, the Anaconda, doesn't use any venom. One Pokemon you think might be in here is Serperior. It looks a lot like a snake, but I've chosen to include it as a legless lizard. Those little arms on the back are very similar to the limbs of legless lizards, which also look a lot like snakes. This means that it's more closely related to the true lizards. Heliolisk is clearly a type of frilled lizard, while Kecleon is obviously a chameleon. As for Inteleon, it shares a lot of similarities with a basilisk, a type of lizard that is quick enough to run on water. This is different from a mythological basilisk, which is often a snake. Scrafty is probably the only one of these that is hard to place. However, its desert habitat and its appearance suggests that it's some sort of desert horned lizard, a type of lizard found in the southwest of the United States, similar to Unova, where Scrafty is found. Within Archelosauria, we also have the turtles. Turtonator is a type of mata-mata turtle, a small aquatic turtle found near the Amazon rainforest. It has a very distinct look, and Turtonator matches this a lot. Dreadnought and Caracosta are also aquatic turtles, but are distantly related from Turtonator, who mainly stands on its own. After this, there's the terrestrial turtles, or tortoises as we call them. Blastoise and Torkoal are both generic turtles with an elemental spin around them. However, Golem is probably the most controversial placement on the whole graph. If you looked at Golem's early evolutions, you'd probably put it in the mineral category. However, one of the rules that I was going with is a final evolution only. This is because I see Pokemon evolution as a type of metamorphosis. The final stage is the adult form, where it is at rest. With this in mind, Golem is a lizard-like animal with a very hard shell. Very, very similar to what a tortoise is. The other group of Archelosauria are called Archosaurs. This group includes the crocodilians and birds, but also what we now call dinosaurs. Because dinosaurs are all extinct, it becomes a bit more difficult to place them on this tree. Lapras is a great example of this. It's clearly a plesiosaur. There is quite a bit of debate about where a plesiosaur would fit on this tree. However, some people do think that it should come here, straight after the turtles and just before the crocodiles. This makes a lot of sense for a Pokemon like Lapras, which has a hard shell similar to a turtle, hence why it will be going here on my tree. Like I said, the crocodilians come next. I think that all three of the crocodilian Pokemon are crocodiles. Feraligatr shares a lot more in common with a crocodile than it does its namesake. For example, its large size, V-shaped snout, and separated toes are all traits of crocodiles, not of alligators. From here, we can see the first stages of airborne life on this side of the tree. Aerodactyl is obviously a pterodactyl and would fit in right here. After this, we move on to a type of dinosaur called the Ornithischia. This literally means bird-hipped, due to the similarities between these type of dinosaurs and birds. This group is made up of a lot of very large herbivore dinosaurs. We have Torterra, who's an Ankylosaurus, and then two Pokemon who fit together both in theme and in this Pokemon family tree. Rampardos, the Pachycephalosaurus, and Bastiodon, the Triceratops. When you really think about it, it makes sense that these three are very closely related. They're all based around armor and protection. In contrast to this, we have the Saurischian dinosaurs, or lizard-hipped. In this grouping, we have sauropods, defined by their very long necks. This is where Meganium and Aurorus are found. It's also where we get the raptors of Pokemon, Sceptile, Tyrantrum, and Komodo. Whilst Komodo's name does come from the Komodo dragon, I think that its raptor-like body and similarities to the Ankylosaurus make it seem much more like a dinosaur. This then takes us off to the part of my chart where I've had to make it up. Whilst the birds split off from this part, Pokemon features dragons, and I needed a way to put these on the chart. I think that the raptor-like bodies that we've previously seen could take us into Druddigon. In this case, Druddigon acts as a dragon patient zero. We can see the development of separate wings in Druddigon, even though it cannot fly. This would take us on to two of our traditional dragons, Dragonite and Charizard. From here, I've split the dragons in half. To the left, we can see the dragons that have stayed upright and have taken on a Godzilla-like build. This is where Haxorus can be found, but also three Pokemon who must be very closely related. Tyranitar, Aggron, and Baxcalibur are very similar in how they look and their body types. They all share that Godzilla build, and I think that they must be really closely related. On the other hand, the other type of dragons have become much more focused on flight. We can see that these dragons have gone on all fours to compensate for this. Salamence is the first to start us off, and then we get Hydreigon, who's the first dragon to start showing serpentine features. This can eventually continue on to form a more eastern style of dragon, similar to Drampa and later Gyarados. Whereas on another grouping, we can see that Hydreigon's many heads are reflected in Hydrapple, and later on in its counterparts Flapple and Appleton. That's all for this video. Are there any changes or mistakes that you could bring up to me? If you've liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing so that I know to make more of it. Thank you.